a non-linear approach to astrological delineation, especially when it comes to delineating horary charts. What am I talking about? I am talking about and highlighting a problem that I myself used to have when it comes to delineating astrological charts, especially with horary astrology. Now, it's important that when you're looking at a chart and delineating it, that you don't fall into the bad habit, the indoctrinated habit, the programmed habit of reading the chart in a linear fashion. Now, let me take this opportunity to speak about the education system, the mainstream education system, which is designed to indoctrinate you into thinking in a linear fashion, whereby, therefore, you end up interpreting your reality from a linear perspective. And therefore, the way you view the world can therefore be dictated to you from outside of yourself, whereby you have a completely fallacious understanding of the world around you. Life is not linear. Time is not linear. The whole of astrology is not linear. One of the main principles of astrology is having a solid grasp and understanding of the motion of heaven, the rotation of the heavens above you, how quickly the ecliptic is rotating, looking at signs of long and short ascension, coming to an understanding that all of the signs rise in different times. The average for each sign is 4 minutes. However, they don't all 4 minutes for 1 degree. However, they do not all rise in the same amount of time. For example, at this geographic latitude, Libra rises in 171 minutes. Gemini rises in 107 minutes. All right. And Aquarius rises in about 67 minutes. This is important to know and understand, especially when it comes to predictive astrology, because you are therefore able to look at a chart, especially a nativity, a natal chart, look at what sign is rising, and then calculate and circumambulate to find out through quote unquote primary directions, which we call in KhemAstroMath circumambulation 1 to 5. You can look and see what sign is rising and come to the conclusion as to what type of adjustment you would need to make when it comes to prediction through circumambulation, based upon the geographic latitudinal distance from the equator, which gives rise to how long it takes each sign to rise. Thus, when applying the technique of perfections, rather than applying it symbolically, which can still be done alongside it, but rather than just applying it symbolically, you can actually look at the actual rotation of the perfection through each sign based upon the obliquity of the ecliptic in relation to the geographic latitudinal distance from the equator for the location in which you are calculating the circumambulation, i.e. the primary direction, for. What do I mean by this? Well, if you want to know more about that, you have to wait until another lecture where I speak about KhemAstroMath prediction. What I'm speaking about now is the non-linear approach to reading a horary chart. So back to what I was saying, because I was digressing. Now, if you're reading a horary chart and you want to know an answer to a particular query, so let's think of a query. For example, if someone asks you and says, a woman comes to you and says, "Am I pregnant?" You look at the chart in question. Now, in KhemAstroMath, we create horary charts based upon the number of syllables prevalent within the questioner's speech pattern and or 3 colors picked from the clothes they are wearing. which can also create a horary chart, or the random noises that are made by the questioner as they adjust themselves to sit down or walk, or adjust themselves by sitting down in a chair. For example, they can sit down in a chair and their phone could drop on the floor, and you could end up hearing 3 distinct noises coming from the phone as the phone drops onto the floor, like dum dum dum. The phone drops on the floor and bounces 3 times. That's the number 3. And then they say, "Ah, my phone." That's the number 3 again, 3 syllables. And then they twist their body to pick up the phone, and as they twist their body to pick up the phone, there's a squeak from the chair. Yeah. That's 1 syllable. So you have 331. 331 would denote that the ascendant is Aries. See what I mean? Now, back to what I was saying. After you've created a horary chart, when the woman has asked you the question and has said to you, "Am I pregnant?" Then what you would do is you look at the chart. Now, the usual approach would be as follows. We look at the Lord of the Ascendant and we look at the Lord of the Fifth. The Lord of the Ascendant will represent the person asking the question, as well as any planets in the Ascendant will represent the person asking the question, as well as the Moon. And the 5th sector, any planets in the 5th, as well as the Lord of the 5th, will represent what the person is asking about, i.e. are they pregnant? Now, usually what is written in the ancient text is as follows. If the Lord of the 1st is making an applicational aspect with the Lord of the 5th, or if the Lord of the 5th is making an applicational aspect to the Lord of the 1st, and or if any planets are translating the light between those 2 planets, then she is pregnant. And or if the Lord of the 1st is in the 5th, and if the Lord of the 5th is in the 1st, then she is pregnant. Now, note that what I just said is what you would usually find written in ancient texts, all right, when it comes to medieval Arabic astrology. However, this is only a tip of the iceberg in terms of how it actually works in practice. How do I know this? Because I spent many years painstakingly carrying out field research to find out if these aphorisms work. And what I have found is that when you blindly apply these aphorisms that are written in ancient texts over a prolonged period of time, and you rigorously test them out repeatedly on random members of the public, what I found out is that most of them do not work. Unless you imply a extremely high degree of intuition, and or you employ an extensive understanding of the geometry of the oblique circle. The oblique circle, otherwise known as the ecliptic, or the era, barouj, in Arabic. So, I found that when applying these aphorisms, what the ancients did not write down, what they neglected to write down, which I think they did purposely, is that you can't blindly say, is the Lord of the 1st making an applicational aspect with the Lord of the 5th. You have to look at it from a perspective which is multifaceted and looked at upon multiple different geometric levels. This, and only this, will allow you to be able to have a concrete understanding as to what the chart is actually saying. And then you can employ your intuition to ascertain whether or not what you're seeing and what you're feeling intuitively line up and tally up with one another. All right. So back to the original question. So this random woman says to you, "Am I pregnant?" We look and we say, is the Lord of the Ascendant making aspect with the Lord of the 5th? What that aphorism actually means, and should be translated to, as far as I'm concerned, based upon my many years of experience applying these aphorisms, is as follows. we look at the Lord of the Ascendant. So in this example, we already concluded that 331 were the numbers that we were able to extract from the questioner's auric magnetic field, and created the chart where the ascendant is Aries. All right. Therefore, and in KhemAstroMath-Horary, if the person asking the question is male or female, that must be taken into consideration. And if we have an ascendant which is ruled by Mars, and the person asking the question is female, you must flip the chart around 180 degrees to make the ascendant Lord be Venus for a woman. All right. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail as to why that is the case, but I've tested this extensively while I was working on a psychic hotline. Let me give a little bit of background to this. This was how many years ago now? About 5 years ago now. I worked on a psychic hotline. I wanted to test out the aphorisms that I understood in terms of Horary astrology, and I wanted to read for random members of the public. I was already doing this on the street for many years before that, but I wanted to test it out on a professional level whereby you get paid for reading random people who give you no information. And I was utilizing Horary astrology to do this based upon the number of syllables in their speech pattern and or 3 random numbers that they would give me. Now, what I found is that people would phone up, and then I will say to them, which area of life would you like me to cover? And they'll say, oh, I would like to know about my work. And I say to them, can you give me, I ask them the random numbers. I'll say to them, give me a number from 1 to 12, please. They give me that number. I say to them, can you give me another number from 1 to 12, please? They give me that number. I say, and finally, can you give me a number from 1 to 7, please? And based upon those numbers, I would create a Horary chart. Now, most people would want to know about their work. Now, back to what I was saying. Yeah. What would end up happening is, if somebody asks about their work and you look at the ascendant and say, for example, the person asking the question is female and the numbers they give you denotes that the ascendant is Aries, then what I found is that if you take Mars to represent the female asking the question and you start reading the chart and look at the Lord of the 10th being Saturn, Zohal, Saturn, and you look at Saturn and you look at Mars and you begin delineating, the answer will be incorrect. And that the answer will only be correct if you flip the chart around so that Libra becomes the ascendant and Venus represents the person asking the question. And therefore, when you're looking at the Lord of the 10th, you're looking at the moon and you're reading it from that perspective. I tested this out extensively and that's what I found. Now back to what I was saying. The original example that we had here was a woman asking a question, wanted to know whether she was pregnant, and the numbers that were extracted from her auric magnetic field was 331, therefore the ascendant being Aries. But because she is a woman, according to KhemAstroMath-Horary philosophy, we need to flip the chart around from being an Aries ascendant to a Libra ascendant, and thus we look at the ascendant being Libra, whose lord is Venus. Now, the aphorisms as follows that would be employed usually will be, is Venus making an applicational aspect with Saturn? Because Saturn is the lord of the 5th from Aries. Yeah, Aquarius is the 5th. Sorry, not Aries. Saturn is the lord of the 5th from Libra. Aquarius being the 5th from Libra. All right. Now, this aphorism would be as follows, according to KhemAstroMath. It should be interpreted as follows. We look at the lord of the ascendant, Venus. So, for example, if you have Venus in Scorpio within this particular example, we need to look at not only the lord of the radical 5th, i.e. Saturn, being the lord of the radical 5th, Aquarius, we must also look at the lord of the 5th from the place of the lord of the ascendant. Thus, we look at the position of Venus being in Scorpio and therefore we must look at Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is a universal significator for children anyway, but in this example we would have to also look at Jupiter being the lord of the fifth from the place of the lord of the ascendant, due to the fact that the lord of the ascendant is in Scorpio. So then we are looking at Jupiter and Saturn, yeah? And then on top of this, you will also need to look at the moon, the position of the moon. Now say in this example, the moon happens to be traversing the fourth, Capricorn. So you need to look at the lord of the fifth from the place of the moon. So you need to look at Venus herself again. So you're looking at Venus, you're looking at the moon, you're looking at Saturn, and you're looking at Jupiter. All of these planets would need to be analyzed in relation to the law of the ascendant to understand and come to your delineational conclusion as to whether or not the woman is pregnant or not. Now, remember the aphorism was, is the lord of the first making an applicational aspect with the lord of the fifth, as well as is the lord of the first in the fifth. So you need to look at whether or not Venus is in Aquarius, which is the radical fifth, and or is Venus in Pisces, which is the fifth from the place of the lord of the ascendant, and is Venus in Taurus, yeah, which is the lord of the fifth from the place of the moon. You need to look at all of those. And or is Venus making an aspect to any planets within those places, and or is Venus aspecting or being aspected by planets who are lords of those places. Now, on top of this, this is now the part where the KhemAstroMath-Horary philosophy comes into play in terms of the innovative way in which the horary practice has been innovated upon based upon practical experience. You must look at the lord of the ascendant in the first division, the earthly one. So we look at Venus, who's the lord of the ascendant. Libra is the ascendant, Venus is the lord of the ascendant, and you look at Venus in the first division, the first divisional chart. In this example, Venus is in Scorpio. We then look at the position of Venus in the 12th divisional chart and see the position of Venus. All right. Now, in this example, let's say Venus, let's use the planetary positions as of now at this point in time. So, right now, Venus is in Scorpio, yes? In the first division. And the 12th part of Venus is in Pisces. Exalted. Yeah. And by declination, Venus is also in Scorpio. So we look at the lord of the ascendant in the first divisional ecliptic chart. We look at the lord of the ascendant in the 12th divisional ecliptic chart. And we look at the lord of the ascendant in the first divisional declinational equivalent chart. Those are the three places we're looking at when we're looking at Venus. And then we look at the lord of the radical fifth, and we look at the lord of the fifth from Venus in all of those places. And then we also look at the lord of the fifth from all those places in all of those positions. Example, we look at the lord of the radical fifth, Saturn. The radical fifth at this point in time is in Pisces, which is 6 in this example, the 6th sector. Then we look at the 12th part of the lord of the radical fifth. He also happens to be in Pisces. Then we look at the declinational position of the lord of the radical fifth. He happens to be in Aquarius. So you're looking at Saturn in 2 places at this point in time. You also look at Jupiter, because Jupiter is the lord of the 5th from the place of the lord of the ascendant. So you must study the position of Jupiter. So you look at Jupiter in the 1st division at this point in time. In this particular example, is in the 8th from Libra, i.e. Taurus. Then we look at the 12th part of Jupiter. The 12th part of Jupiter in this particular example happens the 12th part of Jupiter in this particular example happens to be in Cancer, which is the 10th sector in this example. Then we look at the declinational position of Jupiter. In this chart, the declinational position of Jupiter is in Leo in the 11th. So you're looking at Jupiter in 3 different places. Then you look at the moon. Remember, looking at the lord of the 5th from the moon, and the moon becoming a signifier for the person asking the question. The lord of the 5th from the moon is Venus, because the moon at this point in time is in Capricorn, and the lord of the 5th from Capricorn is Venus, because the 5th from Capricorn is Taurus. All right, so we look at Venus, look at the dignity between Venus and the moon to ascertain whether or not the woman is pregnant. Then we look, and therefore from this perspective, you're looking at, you must also look at the lord of, you must study the moon in the 1st division and study the moon in the 12th division. Where is the 12th part of the moon? And then by declination, where is the moon? You look at all of those together and you put it all together and weigh up all of the odds, rather than just saying, let's look at the lord of the ascendant, Venus. Let's look at the lord of the 5th, Saturn. Are they making an aspect? Is Venus in the 5th? Is Saturn in the 1st? Are they aspecting each other? That is a linear approach that I myself was guilty of taking into consideration when reading a chart. And I realized you must take a multifaceted approach when looking at charts, and look at planets in multiple different positions, and look at all of the different derivative houses all at the same time, in order to come to a viable conclusion as to what you are actually looking at. It's very important to not think in a linear fashion. Those of you who are annoyed by me raising my voice are free to go to the top left of your screen and press back and watch another video. Back to what I was saying. Now then, the question I get a lot is, why in KhemAstroMath do you have to look at all of these planetary positions all at the same time? Why? Why are you looking at planets in the 1st divisional ecliptic chart, looking at planets in the 12th divisional ecliptic chart, and superimposing that 12th divisional ecliptic chart over the 1st divisional ecliptic chart, then looking at the declinational equivalent position of planets in the 1st divisional declinational chart, and superimposing all those 3 charts on top of each other? And why do you have to do it mentally? And only if you have a chart on the screen, you must only have the 1st divisional chart on the screen only, and the rest must be done in your mind. The reason why it's stressed that this must be the case is due to the fact that as soon as you begin to write down something, what ends up happening is that your left brain, the logical side of your thought process, begins to take precedence, and it destroys or greatly inhibits your intuitive faculties. Hence why a lot of ancient knowledge is usually passed down by word of mouth, whereby the receiver of the knowledge is required to memorize the information and not write it down. Yes, part of the reason is to keep the information secret, but a large part of it is due to the fact that once you write it down, it becomes almost solidified and takes away from the esoteric quality of the information itself. In the case of how it's applied to the application of KhemAstromath-Astrology, is that as soon as you begin to draw an astrological chart, or you bring up an astrological chart on astrological software, as soon as you start reading that, you are reading it in a logical manner, and it takes away from your natural, innate, intuitive faculties. Understand? What do I mean by this? Now, I'm sure some of you who are listening will be familiar with the left brain, right brain test online, which consists of a silhouette of a ballerina spinning around, looking at whether she spins clockwise or anti-clockwise. And based upon whether she's spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise, you can conclude whether or not your left brain is in function or your right brain is in function. Now, I'm fully aware that the left brain and right brain principle is not exactly supported from the biological standpoint, but in colloquial understanding of this concept, we have come to the collective consensual understanding that left brain means logical and right brain means intuitive, or left brain means masculine and right brain means feminine. So this is how I'm going to describe these concepts. Yeah, the objective and the subjective realm, the light and the dark. All right, now, yeah, this example of looking at the ballerina silhouette on the screen and looking at whether or not she's spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise is utilized to determine whether the individual is more left brain orientated or right brain orientated. And what you would notice is that when you are reading or looking at the ballerina spinning around, you may see her spinning in an orientation that denotes that you're more right brain orientated, i.e. more intuitive focused. But as soon as you start reading some text that is written on the screen next to her, she'll start spinning in the direction which denotes that you are more left brain orientated. Hence, the very act of reading something makes your left brain take a dominant role. Thus, this is the reason why, well, one of the main reasons why, in the Committee of Ancient Astronomical Mathematics, we stress the importance of creating charts mentally within your mind, so that you can fully have both sides of the brain working in a more balanced and cohesive manner, so that one does not inhibit the other from functioning. Okay, so back to the example of what I was speaking about the chart, the pregnancy, all of that. People ask me, why are you looking at all of these things? Why is there so much extensive geometry involved? And why can't you just look at the chart from the perspective of saying, this is the ascendant, this is the lord of the fifth, this is the lord of the first, are they coming together? And then conclude. Because it doesn't work that way. I am telling you it doesn't work that way because I've tested it and it doesn't work that way. I've tested it and it doesn't work that way. I'm going to say it one more time. I've tested it and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all. You have to look at multiple different things taking place on multiple different levels of correspondence in order to ascertain what's happening in physical reality, because life is not linear and neither is astrology. Time is not linear. The very concept of time is based upon the motion of heaven, the rotation of the sky, and energy spiraling out from a point of singularity in all different directions in a clockwise and anti-clockwise motion. Okay? And you must look at all of these expanding pieces of random bits of corresponding astronomical information and quantify it based upon your understanding of the essential dignities between the planets. All right? So this is something which many people find difficult to grasp when they first start studying KhemAstroMath, because it requires you to unlearn all of the nonsense that you learned in the mainstream education system when it comes to how to perceive your physical reality. Life is not linear, and neither is astrology. It's not linear. If astrology was linear, the chart that we look at would not be circular. It would not be a square in some cases. It would be a straight line. The chart is not a straight line. And that therefore confirms that astrology is not linear. So you understand? Get out of the habit of thinking in a linear mindset. Get out of it. One way to help you to get out of that way of thinking, which is detrimental to your understanding of being able to reach high levels of advancedness when it comes to the practice of astrology, is to practice writing with both hands. Take your dominant hand and write down the alphabet, A to Z for English speakers, and write down the numbers from 0 to 9 with your dominant hand. And then do the same thing with your non-dominant hand. And practice this every day until you are able to write as legibly with your non-dominant hand as you write with your dominant hand, and getting both of your hands to be able to write in an extremely legible manner, in a balanced manner. So for example, with me, I began in, this is going back many years now, back in, I was at university, so this would have been 2002. So 2002, I began going to university lectures and decided, because I am predominantly right-handed, because we are forced when we go into the mainstream education system to use one hand only. They say to you, don't use both hands. You must choose a hand, because the mainstream education system is designed to limit your abilities so that you become more trainable and you are forced into the world of work and become like a large majority of those who are in the world of work, who run on a hamster wheel chasing a dream that they never usually never reach, and end up dying and retiring without ever reaching the goal that they were trying to chase all the way through their whole career. Only a few people reach to the point where they're satisfied with working and reaching the goal and their aspirations in life. Most people spend most of the time working, chasing. Then they reach 65 and then they retire, and then they get terminal illness and they die, realizing that life is nothing like you thought it would be, and that everything you were taught in school was nonsense. Yeah. Now, what you were taught in school is to write with your dominant hand and neglect writing with your non-dominant hand, which I think is incorrect. It should be encouraged, as far as I'm concerned, that you write with both hands. Now, back in 2002, I decided when I was at university that I would go into university lectures and write with my left hand. Yeah. At first, I couldn't even keep up with what the lecturer was saying and writing things down. And if I could keep up with what the lecturer was saying while taking notes with my left hand, the notes were so messy and ineligible that it was unbelievable that I wrote it. But I continued doing it until I was able to write extremely quickly with my left hand in an extremely neat and legible fashion. And my left hand writing was getting to the point where it was rivaling my right hand writing. I continued this process all the way from that point up until the present day, where I can write extremely quickly, legibly, with my right hand and my left hand. This, at the time, I was doing it because I believed that it would help with my ability to understand my reality, as well as greatly assist in my ability to play the piano, because I'm a self-taught pianist and I wanted to become more proficient on the piano so that it would enhance my ability to produce music, because I was producing a lot of music back then. Now, this is an exercise that you can do for yourself, writing with your non-dominant hand and your dominant hand, and trying to make sure that both hands write in a legible manner, equaling and or rivaling each other. This will open up other facets of the auric magnetic field attributed to your mind, yeah, or as scientists will say, parts of the brain which you otherwise will not use, yeah, due to the fact that you're confining yourself to only writing with your dominant hand. I found this helped a lot, and throughout all of the training that I did with writing with both hands, it greatly enhanced my ability to interpret and read and delineate astrological charts, because you're not thinking in a linear fashion. You're utilizing areas of your mind that would otherwise lay dormant. Now, when you first start writing with your non-dominant hand, what you would find is that you're using the same part of your mind or brain to write with your non-dominant hand that you would usually use to write with your dominant hand, and it will feel strange. You have to keep at it and keep on writing, keep writing, keep writing. Then you'll find something will happen. If you keep at it long enough, something will happen where something switches in your auric magnetic field, where when you write with your dominant hand, you're using the part of the brain that you would usually use to write. Then when you write with your non-dominant hand, you're using the part of your mind slash brain that is opposite from the part of your brain slash mind that you would use for writing with your dominant hand. Something switches around, and that part of your mind that was neglected as a result of you not writing with your non-dominant hand becomes active, and you start to build it and cultivate it moving forward. This is important, very important. Another way to cultivate left and right brain equilibrium is to practice counting in both directions. What do I mean by this? Counting in both directions. So you count from 1 to 12 out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And while you are doing that, in your mind, you're counting from 12 to 1. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah? So you count from 1 to 12 out loud, and in your mind, you count from 12 to 1. Then you swap it around. You count down from 12 to 1 out loud, and in your mind, you count from 1 to 12. This is a useful exercise because you're counting in both directions at the same time. Understand that? This is very much needed to break the bad habit that you've been taught from the mainstream education system, which is only count from 1 to 12 and only write with your dominant, only count in one direction at a time and only write with your dominant hand. This limits you. It limits your perception and limits your ability to interpret the world around you. Now, yeah, this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the plethora of exercises that you would be given if you were studying KhemAstroMath, because there's a lot of damage that has been done to the way we think due to the mainstream education system, which dumbs us down. You have to unlearn what you've learned and then relearn how to interpret the world so that you understand how you can better manage reading a chart in a non-linear fashion. Now, what I found is the ancient texts that are written on ancient astrology, the authors, i.e. Mashallah and Sa'al ibn Bisra and Al-Kindi or Abu Ali al-Khayyat, all these people, they were practicing in a world where the quadrivium was a natural part of the education system. You needed to learn the quadrivium. What is the quadrivium, you may ask? What is it? Arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. So when you're reading these books, you're reading text that is written by an author who is under the assumption that the reader will have a solid grasp of geometry. Now, we are not taught geometry in the mainstream education system these days, at least not geometry as it was taught in medieval times, in terms of a circle, understanding the geometry of the oblique circle, the geometry of the ecliptic, the geometry of the Herbal, the geometry of that circle, that band that is created by the sun, known as the ecliptic, that all of the planets seem to stay within. Not all the time, but stay within that band, yeah? You're studying the geometry of the circle. Circular geometry is one of the main foundations of the understanding of astrology in the first place. All of the aspects come from geometry. All of them. The opposition, the dodecagon, otherwise known as the semisextile, the hexagon, otherwise known as the sextile, the tetragon, otherwise known as the square, the trigon, otherwise known as the trine, the pentagon, otherwise known as the inconjunct. Then we're back to the opposition. Yeah. All of these aspects are based upon the geometry of the oblique circle. Now, it's very easy to learn astrology online these days and look and say, this is the astrological chart. Look at the ascendant. So, for example, what time is it now? Right now, I'm in London, UK, and the time is 1600 hours and 27 minutes. So, therefore, I would conclude that we are right at the end of Gemini on the ascendant. How do I know that Gemini is on the ascendant at this point in time? We know that Gemini is on the ascendant at this point in time because at this time of year, Gemini would be rising based upon my understanding of the motion of heaven. Based upon the position of the sun. Sun is what? Around 18 degrees at this time. Sun is around 18 degrees in the tropical sign of Sagittarius. And therefore, it's about Gemini would rise 52 minutes earlier. Around 52 minutes earlier. So 19 degrees is the position of the sun. Gemini will rise around 52 to 56 minutes earlier. So therefore, about an hour earlier, Gemini would rise. At this time of year, Gemini would rise around 1500 hours and 45 minutes. So therefore, I'll say about 56 minutes earlier, so 1445 would be Gemini rising, and Gemini rises 107 minutes. So 1445, and then we go to 1545, 92. So therefore around 1632, approximately around 1630, we get Cancer on the ascendant. So therefore, right now at this geographic latitude 52 north, geographic latitudinal distance from the equator, the sign on the ascendant at this point in time in London would be end of Gemini, beginning of Cancer. Yeah, that is what would be happening. So let's just assume, or shall I say, let's take an example of Cancer rising, since Cancer is just about to rise. Let's take an example of Cancer rising. That was the motion of heaven, by the way, the technique that I just utilized just now to calculate what signs on the ascendant. That's known as the motion of heaven, level 1. Now, let's take an example. Say Cancer is rising on the ascendant. Cancer is a sign of long ascension, by the way. Now, if we look at this, we say, oh, it's easy to look online and learn astrology based upon the principles that are usually repeated by most people and regurgitated by everybody else. So we say Cancer's rising, and we say, all right, Cancer's rising, and Scorpio, therefore, is the 5th house. Yeah. So if there's a planet in Cancer and there's a planet in Scorpio, they will be making a trine to each other, which is 120 degrees in terms of the aspectual relationship between them. And then it's easy to look at that and then stop at that point. But let's really break down what we're actually looking at. If there is a planet in Cancer and a planet in Scorpio, yes, there's a trine between them, a trigon, 120 degrees aspect. That is true. But where does the trine come from? The trine comes from the fact that we are looking at circular geometry, the foundation of which astrology is largely based upon. All right, so let's look at it. You can see that Cancer trines Scorpio, and Scorpio trines Pisces, and Pisces trines Cancer. We see all of that. And you can also see that this is basic geometry that we're looking at here. And thus, we can also say that the 1st sector trines the 5th sector, and the 5th sector trines the 9th sector. All right? So those numbers are what? 1, 5, and 9 trine each other. The 1st sign trines the 5th sign, and the 5th sign trines the 9th sign, and the 9th sign trines the 1st sign. And the 1st house, or 1st sector, trines the 5th sector, and the 5th sector trines the 9th sector, and the 9th sector trines the 1st sector. Now, there are 4 of those grand triangles in every circle. If you take the circle and you split the circle, divided, if you divide the circle into 12 equal parts, and you want to find out how many times there is a grand trine, you would find that there's 4 of them before the pattern begins to repeat. This is the foundation of astrology that, as far as I'm concerned, should be understood before getting into reading charts, because it will make it much easier to understand what you are looking at. Yeah. So you can see that the 1st sign trines the 5th, trines the 9th. The 2nd sign trines the 6th, trines the 10th, trines the 2nd. Now, we can keep going all the way until we get to the 4th trine, which I am not going to go through right now. Those of you who have ears to hear will work out the rest for yourself, because right about now, I'm giving you some secrets to KhemAstroMath that I've had to work extremely hard to work out for myself. All right. That's just one aspect, by the way, the trine. Not to mention the others. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. This is a quote from a book I read over and over again called The Kabbalion. And I find that it is true. If you understand what I'm saying, you will go and find it out for yourself. And of course, there's going to be some of you who will listen to what I'm saying, find it out for themselves, apply it, and then make a video acting like they made their own discovery themselves, which I don't care about. You can do that as long as the proficiency of astrology is brought up to a higher quality. And even if you did do that, you will know within yourself where you got the information from, and so will I. I will know as well. Yeah. Circular geometry is one of the largest contributory factors to the understanding of how to look at multiple derivative houses all at the same time without becoming discombobulated and confused as to what you are looking at. All right. You may notice that when I'm delineating Horary charts and showing them in demonstrations, especially in the last two videos where I've explained how to delineate a chart, that I am looking at multiple geometric levels of physical manifestation. This is based upon the technique of the 12 levels of geometric manifestation, which takes into consideration all of the derivative houses all at the same time, all superimposed upon one another. Yeah, you look at all of those things together, all of them. It's important to see that. An example, let me explain an example of how this is applied. Yeah, example right now. Yeah. Oh, before I explain that, let me explain what I usually do as an astronomical mathematician when I wake up. As soon as I wake up in the morning and I wake from my slumber, the first thing I do is I calculate what sign is rising on the tropical ascendant. I mentally calculate that in my mind with my eyes closed. After ascertaining what sign is rising, I also calculate the position of the moon mentally, where she is, what sign she's in, what planets she has separated from geometrically in terms of aspects, then look at what planets she is applying to in terms of geometric aspectual relationship that she has with other planets. Then I calculate the planetary hour. Then from there I mentally generate a Horary chart for myself, the KhemAstroMath Daily Horary, as it's called. And based upon that chart that I've created mentally, based upon a question I may ask that has that generates three numbers based upon the number of syllables in the question I'm asking, or I look at three random colors that may be around me in my surroundings, or the sounds that I can hear, that will create the Horary chart together with the tropical ascendant. And then I will delineate that Horary chart in my mind mentally to conclude as to what type of day I'm going to have. If I have to carry out errands, for example, going to the shop to buy something, I calculate whether or not what I'm going to buy is actually in stock. I delineate the weather as to whether or not it's going to rain, what the weather is going to be like. If I need to get on a bus or public transport, what I'm going to experience. If I have to go to a meeting, I look to see who I'm going to encounter, what clothes they're going to be wearing, how they're going to speak to me, what experience I'm likely to have with them, and prep myself as to what type of day I'm going to have. That's what I usually do. KhemAstroMath is not something I practice per se. It's something I live. All right? It's intertwined with everything that I'm doing. Now, the thing with this is that, remember what I mentioned before about creating charts in your mind and not writing it down so that both sides of the brain can work in a state of equilibrium without one side having the ability to inhibit the abilities of the other. All right? Now, again, let me go back to the 12 levels of geometric manifestation, looking at multiple derivative houses or derivative sectors, all superimposed upon one another, and having the ability to look at that and delineate the chart without getting lost or discombobulated as a result of it. Yeah. Now, so this morning I woke up. I needed to go to a meeting. Yeah. To discuss the possibilities of being able to be accepted onto a course of study. Yeah. I wanted to know whether or not, like, how the meeting's going to go and what's likely to take place, what's likely to happen. Now, for today, I woke up, I asked the question. I don't remember exactly how I worded the question, but I do know that the numbers were 2, 4, 4, which, according to KhemAstroMath-Horary philosophy, generates an ascendant that is between 300 degrees to 330 degrees absolute longitude, which is the tropical sign of Aquarius. All right. So I delineated the chart in my mind while I was getting ready to leave the house to go to said meeting. Yeah. And I looked and I concluded, I said, okay, I'm going to a meeting. What's going to be happening at this meeting? What is likely to take place? Yeah. I looked at the ascendant, said the ascendant is Aquarius, and we looked at all of that. And the meeting is with an authority who has connections to an educational institution and or establishment. So thus, I look to the 10th. Now, if Aquarius is the ascendant, note, I'm deliberately here not showing you the chart in question, because the chart that I generated was generated in my mind. All right. And it was the chart for today. Yeah. The chart for the 13th of December 2023. Yeah. And it was generated this morning around 0800 hours and 55 minutes. Yeah. So I looked at the chart, I said the ascendant is Aquarius, and therefore we need to look to the 10th, because the authority that I'm going to is linked to an education institution or establishment. Now, if the ascendant is Aquarius, then the 10th is Scorpio, and the 10th represents the authority, and we can see that in the 10th is Venus in detriment, and Venus also happens to be the lord of the 9th, because Aquarius is the ascendant, therefore the 9th is Libra, and Venus is the lord of the 9th. The 9th represents educational institutions and or establishments. So the lord of the 9th, educational institutions or establishments, being in the 10th, i.e. an authority who I had to go and speak to discuss whether or not I can be accepted onto a course of study. Yeah. Being in the 10th, the lord of the 9th, education, in the 10th, the authority who I needed to speak to, showed that the chart was fully representing the situation at hand. Now, not only this, but decly Mercury, by declination, Mercury was and is still in the 10th, joined with Venus, who is the lord of the 9th. I looked at it and therefore concluded that what is likely to take place is that there will be some legislative issue that will cause a delay that would inhibit the person who I speak to from being able to come to a conclusion as to whether or not I will be accepted onto the course. And one of the main reasons why is because due to the fact that Mercury, again, today, stationing and going retrograde, all right? The first part of Mercury is in the 12th in this particular chart, yeah? First part of Mercury is in Capricorn in the 12th. Stationing, about to go retrograde. And Mercury, being in Capricorn, is in the detriment of the moon. The moon is the lord of the 9th from the place of the 10th. So the 9th from the 10th, the lord of the 9th from the 10th is the moon. Yeah. So what we're looking at? We're looking at going to an authority. The authority is represented by the 10th and any planets in the 10th and the lord of the 10th. Yeah. And in this particular example, Aquarius is the ascendant. Scorpio is therefore the 10th. Venus and decly Mercury are in the 10th. And the first part of Mercury is in Capricorn in the 12th. Yeah. In the detriment of the lord of the 9th from the 10th. Remember, the 9th represents educational institutions and or establishments. So my conclusion from that, you can see that whoever I would speak to who will be in a position of authority, when they try to inquire as to whether or not I can be accepted onto the course of study, that there will be a problem with them being able to make it come into manifestation due to a legislative issue, because they, being in a 10th, they're looking to see whether I'll be accepted onto the course, and they'll look at it and say, okay, let's see if you be accepted onto the course. As far as they're concerned, them being in the 10th, as far as they're concerned, the 9th from where they are is Cancer, and the lord of the 9th from the 10th is the moon, and Mercury is in the 10th. Mercury is in the fall of the lord of the 9th from the place of Mercury, Decli Mercury I'm speaking of here, yeah. And then, because by declination Mercury is in the 10th, joined with Venus, who's the lord of the radical 9th, education, and the first part of Mercury is in the 12th, that means something hidden and mysterious about the person who I speak to when it comes to them coming to an understanding as to whether or not I can be accepted onto the course, because they're unsure. The 12th house is hidden, unsurety, not knowing what the outcome is likely to be. And then the first part of Mercury is in Capricorn, which is the detriment of the lord of the 9th from the 10th. That's two testimonies that there's likely to be some confusion based upon some legislative issue. Legislative issue because Mercury represents legislation again. Further, the lord of the 10th, Mars, is in Sagittarius in the 11th, all right? And Sagittarius happens to be the detriment of Mercury. So that's a further testimony that there will be some issue when it comes to the task at hand. On top of this, the lord of the 10th, Mars, is in Sagittarius, joined with the Sun. The Sun is the lord of the 9th from the place of Mars. And the ascendant is Aquarius. And by declination, the lord of the ascendant, Saturn, so Decli Saturn, is in Aquarius. And Aquarius is the detriment of the Sun. The Sun being the lord of the 9th from the place of the lord of the 10th. Do you get it? Now, let me stop here, because I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. Notice I'm using multiple derivative houses. I'm looking at the lord of the 9th from the place of the lord of the 10th. I'm looking at the lord of the 9th from the 10th. And I'm also looking at the lord of the radical 9th. And looking at essential dignity in conjunction with all of that. Yeah. And yes, the outcome was that there was some legislative issue that stopped me from, well, it stopped the person who I spoke to from being able to come to a conclusion as to whether or not I can be accepted onto the course. Yeah. I knew that this was going to happen long before I even got there, due to the fact that I mentally generated a horary chart in my mind before I actually got to the place. All right. Now, it's easy. It would have been easy to look at that chart and say, oh, Mercury is stationary retrograde, so therefore there could be some legislative issue. And Mercury is in Capricorn. Okay, cool. So because Mercury is in Capricorn, there might be an issue. I wonder if there's going to be a delay as a result of all of this. I'm speaking to an authority. The lord of the 10th is Mars, and Mars is in the 11th in the detriment of Mercury, so a legislative issue. But the multiple testimonies that I was able to pull out of the chart was as a result of looking at multiple derivative houses, multiple derivative sectors, looking at all of those together and looking at the essential dignities and coming up to multiple testimonies that support the fact that there will be some legislative issue that stops the person who I speak to from being able to find out whether or not I can be accepted onto the course of study. You get it? Now, there's a lot more that was involved in this meeting per se that I don't even need to mention here. But what I'm demonstrating here is that that was not a linear approach to reading the chart. That was looking at the chart from multiple different levels based upon geometry and coming to an understanding of how the geometry of the oblique circle works. The geometry of the oblique circle, the geometry of the ecliptic, the geometry of the era Baruch, the circle of animals, the zodiac. Yeah. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that it's important to unlearn what you have been taught in terms of how you think about reading the chart, and understand that you must look at it on multiple different levels. I cannot stress this enough. But you can't learn how to do this overnight. It's something that needs to be done over a prolonged period of time, whereby you are looking at the way you think, analyzing it, and carrying out various mental exercises to unlearn the nonsense that you've learned in the mainstream education system when it comes to the interpretation of your reality based upon your thought process. You cannot be linear when reading charts. You won't get the answer. And if you do read a chart in a linear fashion and you're able to get the correct answer, it's usually as a result of your intuition taking over, rather than you knowing intuitively what the answer is likely to be and then being able to weigh up the odds in a balanced manner with what you're seeing geometrically based upon mathematical calculation. All right? Now, I hope that what I have said has helped a lot of people when it comes to reading the chart, and has given some food for thought for those of you who want to explore the geometry of the oblique circle more extensively, so that you're not reading the chart in a static manner. I used to do the same thing. I used to read the chart static. I read the chart, I look at the first, I used to look at the first divisional chart only look at planets in the first divisional chart. Are they making an aspect to one another? Is a planet translating the light? And therefore, and then intuitively know what the answer is likely to be, and then come to my conclusion, get it right, and then convince myself that I calculated the answer when really I intuited the answer. It should be both. You should be able to calculate the answer and intuit the answer. Both of those, not one or the other. It causes an imbalance. To read a chart based upon intuition alone can be extremely accurate, but creates an imbalance because you're only using one side of your mind/brain. And to read a chart with and delineate a chart based upon astronomical calculation, mathematical calculation alone, would and can allow you to get an accurate answer, but creates an imbalance because you're only utilizing one part of your mind/brain, i.e. the left brain, to calculate and come to the answer. It has to be both, as far as I'm concerned. KhemAstroMath teaches that you read a chart based upon intuition and logic in an equal manner, and put both of those together to come to a viable conclusion as to what you are looking at. All right? So yes, practice writing with your dominant hand as well as your non-dominant hand, and try to get the handwriting on both to be equally legible. Practice counting out loud forwards, i.e. count from 1 to 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, while in your mind recite the same numbers from 12 to 1. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then reverse it. Count out loud from 12 to 1, and in your mind count in your mind from 1 to 12. Note, I'm stressing 1 to 12 because there are 12 houses, 12 sectors, and that's what you're mainly chiefly going to be working with when you're reading the chart. You have to be able to count in both directions at the same time in order to be able to view multiple derivative houses at the same time without getting lost. Because I got a lot of queries from people who, when they saw the Horary demonstration chart that I put up, the first one I put up regarding who will I meet today, their laundrette visit. Then the question was, who will I meet today at the laundrette? A lot of people were saying, how are you able to look at all of these derivative houses and not get lost? I'll get confused. Like halfway through when you're explaining, I'm confused in terms of how you're able to keep track of everything. And this is what I'm explaining here. To keep track of everything is to have a solid grasp of the geometry of the circle in the first place. There are sets of numbers that go along with all of the aspects that you should learn forwards and backwards, like the back of your hand, so that when you're looking at a chart, you know which planet is aspecting which planet from what derivative house without having to randomly count it. So you shouldn't be looking and saying, the ascendant is Cancer, Venus is in Scorpio. I wonder what is happening regarding this person's business. If say for example the ascendant is Cancer and you want to know what's happening with the business activity of one of your child, basically. So you look and you say, I wonder what's happening with business with my son. And you look and you say, ascendant is Cancer and Scorpio is therefore the 5th. So let's look at the 6th house from Scorpio, rather than having to look at the chart and say, let's count from Scorpio. Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. Therefore, the 6th house from Scorpio is Aries, and thus Mars represents the business activities of my son, rather than having to count like that randomly. Or I wonder what is happening with my friend. I wonder if my friend is okay in regards to his domestic environment. I wonder if he all of the affairs within his home are okay. So say ascendant is Cancer and you say, I wonder what's happening. So we look to Taurus, which is the 11th, representing friends. Then you say, I wonder what's happening with my friend. You shouldn't have to say, 11th house, we want to know what's happening with the friend. So therefore the 4th from the 11th represents the friend. And then saying, counting randomly. Taurus going 2, 3, 4, 5, and therefore Leo represents the affair, the friend's house. You shouldn't have to count random. You shouldn't have to count in a manual fashion to find out which house is the derivative house from which house. You shouldn't have to do that. That wastes time. And as soon as you begin to count, you start to shut down that right brain and you start going into the left brain. It should be from the perspective of an astronomical mathematician and a practitioner of ChemAstroMath. If the ascendant is Cancer and you say, I wonder what's going on with my son's business, you instantly look to Mars. Yeah? And instantly look to Aries, and you look to any planet in Aries to represent the son's business. If you want to know what's happening with your friends, say for example, you want to know what's happening with your friend has a business that they're running and you want to know what's happening with their business, you instantly look to Venus. Because you know Venus is the lord of the 6th from Taurus. And Taurus is the 11th. You see? You see it? You understand? You shouldn't have to count randomly. And if you understand the geometry of the oblique circle, you don't have to count randomly when you're looking for derivative houses. It's already in your mind, working in the back of your mind like a subroutine running in the background. And thus, when you're looking at charts, you know which houses are derivative from one another, regardless of what you are counting from and where you are counting from. You get it? I hope I've opened up some doors for people, and that people will begin, practitioners of astrology, especially with horary, will begin to apply this information so that the quality of horary astrology can be brought up to a higher level of efficiency and proficiency. And that, as practitioners, more practitioners of especially horary, stop thinking in a linear fashion. You have to look at multiple different levels. Yeah. Anyway, I think I've rambled long enough. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbal SSR, ancient astrologer and astronomical mathematician of the Committee of Ancient Astronomical Mathematics, courtesy of the ThaBadbreyHerbal.co.uk. Hakamanajum Dendra.